Hey guys, Chris from D6 Machina. Today's little vlog, I want to propose an idea, a new way of thinking regarding role-playing games and rule systems. There has been a lot of talk in the last month about the golden age of whether or not we need to have 5th edition as the dominant system, or whether or not we should encourage a broad market of multiple different systems. And in a previous video, I mentioned that the golden age is potentially failing, and it's on the result of some competing companies trying to compete with 5th edition by creating their own variant systems that have exploded and gotten very, very popular, but will ultimately devalue the market as a whole. And there's a lot of people who still make comments saying, I don't want 5e as the juggernaut. I want a broad market with multiple different rule systems that we get to choose which ones we want to play. Now, on the surface, that's good, but a golden age is when creators get to create what they wish to create and can prosper, while people who consume that product can also enjoy. And right now there's a bit of a dichotomy in this market, because we have a system where if there are multiple systems, a creator has to now write potentially one idea for multiple systems in order to generate income in order to survive. And that's ultimately the thing. When someone says, just write a game for this system, if this, why don't you make, I've had people come up to me and go, is Amethyst available for World of Darkness? And I say, if it had more than a 10% market share, maybe I would, but there's no money in it. So in 2014, I created my first Kickstarter for Amethyst, my first Amethyst campaign. I promised to adapt the core book and the second book factions to multiple systems. It was Pathfinder, 4th edition, 5th edition, 13th Age, Savage World, and Fate Core. That is insane. But at the time, I really thought that was the only way for me to generate any income whatsoever. And it was a nightmare. It took 4 years to adapt these books, because I can't keep one system in my head. I have to learn a new system, and then the other system kind of decompiles. So 4th edition had already been made. 13th Age was super easy because it's derived off of 4th edition, so it was easy, and I love that system. And then Savage World and Fate Core were done by Chris Stilson. Pathfinder was an absolute nightmare, because Pathfinder is a very complex system that's very hard to write for. It is. And when the 5th edition version came out, Quintessence, the sales from 5th edition was more than all of the other ones combined. And it became very, very clear that I could focus on the creation of content without having to worry about having to adapt it to multiple systems in order to generate income. And that's where we're at today, where we're dealing with this potential fall of the golden age, because a lot of people are saying it's good that we have all these multiple systems so people can choose, but as a creator, this is what we're trying to explain, that a lot of people aren't getting the answer, that a creator cannot stay in business if they are producing one book for multiple systems to justify the production budgets to make these games. When you have a system where a market where it's broken up 20% chunks, it is impossible, because the market isn't big enough to support one chunk. The people who make that system, that rule, they get to profit. So you get these big juggernauts. And this is the comparison I was trying to make in my previous video, saying this isn't like the 90s. This is like what happened with 4th edition fell. We had all these competing systems emerged to go along with them, from Dungeon Crawl Classics to Pathfinder and so forth. And it was a very hard market. And a lot of companies went out of business around that time period because there was no money. And we're going to see that again. A lot of companies are going to go out of business because they cannot survive trying to focus on these small markets. If you want a book that's got a really good production value, you have no choice but to try to produce it for multiple systems. And that takes time, that takes even more money, and then the end result is you may not end up getting the sales you want, especially when you have multiple systems, because this is not a market full of 3 systems. This is a market full of 20 or 30 systems, because we're seeing so many that are coming out. So it's very, very frustrating as a creator to have to focus on adapting to rules rather than creating new content. And that's why when we did the second half of this Kickstarter in 2022, that we made the decision that we were only going to do it for 5th edition only. Eventually Chris Stilson came on board to do Savage World and Fate, but we won't be doing a Pathfinder, we won't be doing a 13th Age, and we won't be doing a 4th edition, because there simply isn't money in it. If someone bequeathed me money and said, do a 13th Age version of Amethyst Revelations, I would do it. But we need to survive. This is I'm a very left-leaning person. I'm basically a socialist. I believe in communities, but we're stuck in this free market capitalist system where I need to make money to produce content, and I can't do it if I'm constantly adapting the same book for 15 systems. And that's why we need to start looking at these rule systems as operating systems, making the comparisons to the PC market. If you're as old as I am, you remember that there was massive collapses in the video game industry, happened in the 80s, happened again in the 90s, where everybody created their own game console. Atari was big. We need to flood the market with all these competing systems. We happened again in the 90s. And you can look on Wikipedia and find the history of game consoles that failed because there were simply too many of them. Eventually, people who made games looked at it and said, all right, which is the most popular system? PlayStation? We'll make games for PlayStation because it's outselling all the other ones. Nintendo? Sure, we'll make games for Nintendo. It's a bit more difficult. PlayStation was a compact disc format. Seems pretty easy. We'll make our games for that system. And you saw the death of all these other competing systems, 3DO, Amigo, and all this stuff. Even when we got the Dreamcast, it was PlayStation. That's all anyone really cared about was PlayStation 2. And then that was it. The market basically died. And even now today, we have PlayStation, we have Nintendo DS, and we have Xbox. Nobody has tried, and you have tried, but no one has succeeded in trying to compete with this market because people are making games for these juggernauts because there's 10 or 12 million of one, so you have a very large market to sell to. And even then, they're still forced to make the game for multiple systems. Imagine if there were 10 to 20 game consoles and you tried to make a game, and then you would have to spend massive amounts of resources adapting that game to 20 different game consoles. You would never survive. We've had situations where we've had markets and systems collapse because people stopped making games for them. We have 2 graphics card standards, right? We don't have 15. We have 2, right? We have a Windows operating system. No one makes games for Unix, And people say, well, that's a monopoly. Well, no, it's not. It's an operating system. It is a language that you can use to create something. That's what 5th edition needs to be. 5th edition is now open source. It is Creative Commons. It can be the universal system that we all use to convey ideas, to create new rule systems, new settings. It can create the content that people can absorb. We can play with the rules a little bit. We can tweak them here. But the point is, you pick up a book, you lay it down, and 80% of what that game wants to teach you, you already know in your head because you know the system. You are the computer. You've loaded this up. You know it. All you need to do is learn the new offerings of this publication, and ultimately, that's how we need to look at these systems. And so, yeah, a fractured market of 20 different systems is not healthy. It's not going to encourage more people to enter the industry because they're going to look at the fractured systems. And they know there's no money in it. We're not going to see these high quality products coming out because they know that there either has to be a big name company that's dumping a lot of money to create an entire rule system from the ground up. And someone's going to give examples of successful standalone game systems that don't use 5e. And my counter question is, does it use an IP? Because an easy way to make a popular role-playing game system is to generate based off an IP, which is the reason why some of the most successful game systems that we've seen recently have come out of IPs. So there's a Blade Runner game, there's an Alien game that's very, very popular. So it comes down to that in a nutshell. I mean, I think 5th edition is a rule system. I look at it as an operating system. It is the same base format as a PlayStation, an Xbox, or a PC. It's a framework where I can create something that you can use because you have that console, that computer, and that system in your brain. So it allows us to create content and not have to worry about the market share because the market share is massive. People will say I'm making a false equivalency because someone can literally learn a new system. And I'm telling you that's not how this system works, because there is a huge percentage of people that want to play D&D and are not interested. And they come to a table, to your game session, and you're saying, we're not playing D&D, we're playing Numenera. You will have people that are going to be, I'm not interested in learning a whole new system from the ground up. I want to play D&D. If you say we're playing D&D, but we're playing a different setting, it's a different scenario than saying we're learning a brand new rule system. It is a different beast. Learning a new system and playing in a new setting are not the same thing. And it is easier for a producer to create a setting with a system that everybody knows rather than try to create a new rule system from the ground up. Because most of the time, most publishers don't have the capacity to do it, and they don't have the money, and they don't have the time. And so what we're going to see, as we've seen with this conversation about the golden age failing, is that we're going to see a bunch of small publishers fail. And that's because we don't have a dominant system. So I think that's my point for this video. D&D, you should look at 5th edition as an operating system, as something that's open for everyone to use, because it is. And we can now embrace that rule system. And I think the fracturing of this industry, the way we're seeing it now, is not going to be healthy in the long run. Anyway, this has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina.